Criminal Law Book 2. CLJ4. Lecture 009A. Physical Injuries. Welcome back. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss mutilation and serious physical injuries. So, set your devices to silent, lean forward and read along, try to stay awake, and be sure to learn something from this lecture. Let us begin. What are the crimes of physical injuries? They are 1. Mutilation, Article 262, 2. Serious physical injuries, Article 263, 3. Administering injurious substance or beverage, Article 264, 4. Less serious physical injuries, Article 265 and 5. Slight physical injuries and maltreatment, Article 266. Mutilation. Article 262. Mutilation. The penalty of reclusion temporal to reclusion perpetua shall be imposed upon any person who shall intentionally mutilate another by depriving him, either totally or partially, of some essential organ for reproduction. Any other intentional mutilation shall be punished by prison mayor in its medium to maximum period. Mutilation, defined. The term mutilation means the lopping or the clipping off of some part of the body. This means the cutting off of body parts, whether big or small, as long as it does not cause the death of the victim. If the victim dies because of the cut body part, the crime is no longer physical injuries. Two kinds of mutilation. 1. By intentionally mutilating another to deprive him or her, either totally or partially, of some essential organ for reproduction. This type of mutilation is known as castration. The intention to mutilate must be to remove a person's ability to have a child. If the intention is to kill, and the victim lost his penis in the attack but survived, the crime is not physical injuries through mutilation. An example of partially removing some essential organ is cutting off one testicle while leaving the other attached. The victim can still have a child with only one testis, although the chances of a successful fertilization is lower. Removing both testicles is a total deprivation of the ability to procreate or have a child. Cutting off the clitoris because of promiscuity does not deprive a woman, partially or totally, of the ability to have a child. The penalty for this kind of mutilation is imprisonment of 12 years and 1 day to reclusion perpetua. 2. By intentionally making other mutilations, that is, by lopping or clipping off any part of the body of the offended party, other than those essential organs for reproduction, to deprive him or her of that part of his body. This type of mutilation is known as other intentional mutilations. The intention is to deprive the victim of that body part. If the intention is, again, to kill but the victim survived, the crime is, again, not physical injuries. An example of this kind of mutilation is cutting the fingers so that the victim can no longer post offensively on Facebook. Or removing the skin of the testicle while leaving the testicles themselves intact, because the victim is not deprived, partially or totally, of his ability to have kids. The penalty for this kind of mutilation is imprisonment of 8 years and 1 day to 12 years. Elements of mutilation of the first kind. 1. There must be a castration, that is, mutilation of organs necessary for reproduction, such as the penis or ovarium. 2. That the mutilation is caused purposely and deliberately, that is, to deprive the offended party of some essential organ for reproduction. Elements of mutilation of the second kind. 1. There must be lopping or clipping off of some body part other than the organs necessary for reproduction. 2. That the mutilation is caused purposely and deliberately to deprive the offended party of such mutilated body part. Distinctions between the kinds of mutilation. 1. As to the part the body mutilated, in the first kind, it is a reproductive organ, while in the second kind, it is some other part of the body other than the reproductive organs. 2. As to what is deprived, in the first kind, it is the ability to have a child, while in the second kind, it is to deprive that body part that was cut. 3. As to the penalties, in the first kind, the penalty is 12 years and 1 day to reclusion perpetua, while in the second kind, it is 8 years and 1 day to 12 years. Intentional mutilation of a child under 12 years old. If the victim of intentional mutilation is only 12 years old or younger, the penalty is reclusion perpetua, or 20 years and 1 day to 40 years of imprisonment. Serious physical injuries. Article 263. Serious physical injuries. Any person who shall wound, beat, or assault another shall be guilty of the crime of serious physical injuries and shall suffer 1. The penalty of prison mayor, if in consequence of the physical injuries inflicted, the injured person shall become insane, imbecile, impotent, or blind. 2. The penalty of prison correctional in its medium and maximum periods, if on consequence of the physical injuries inflicted, the person injured shall have lost the use of speech or the power to hear or to smell, or shall have lost an eye, a hand, a foot, an arm, or a leg, or shall have lost the use of any such member, or shall have become incapacitated for the work in which he was theretofore habitually engaged. 3. The penalty of prison correctional in its minimum and medium periods, if in consequence of the physical injuries inflicted, the person injured shall have become deformed, or shall have lost any other part of his body, or shall have lost the use thereof, or shall have been ill or incapacitated for the performance of the work in which he was habitually engaged for a period of more than 90 days. 4. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prison correctional in its minimum period, if the physical injuries inflicted shall have caused the illness or incapacity for labor of the injured person for more than 30 days. If the offense shall have been committed against any of the persons enumerated in Article 246, or with attendance of any of the circumstances mentioned in Article 248, the case covered by subdivision number 1 of the article shall be punished by reclusion temporal in its medium and maximum periods. The case covered by subdivision 2 by prison correctional in its maximum period to prison mayor in its minimum period. The case covered by subdivision number 3 by prison correctional in its medium and maximum periods, and in case covered by subdivision number 4 by prison correctional in its minimum and maximum periods. The provisions of the preceding paragraph shall not be applicable to a parent who shall inflict physical injuries upon his child by excessive chastisement. How serious physical injuries are committed. It is committed by 1. Wounding, 2. Beating, or 3. Assaulting, Article 263, or 4. Administering injurious substance. Article 264. Therefore, when the victim grabbed the blade of his own machete as the accused was pulling it out of the scabbard from the victim's waist, the victim cuts his hand in the process. The accused is not guilty of serious physical injuries because he neither wounded, beat, or assaulted the victim. It was the victim who wounded himself by grabbing the blade of the machete. There must not be intent to kill. If the intention of the accused is to kill when he wounded, beat, or assaulted the victim, the crime is not physical injuries. Therefore, when the accused shot the victim on the side of the head, but instead of hitting the brain he hit the eyes that caused the victim to go blind, the crime is frustrated murder, and not serious physical injuries. Elements of different types of serious physical injuries. Elements of the first type of serious physical injuries: 1. That the accused wounded, beat, or assaulted the victim, and 2. That as a result of the physical injuries the victim became insane, imbecile, impotent, or blind. Insane means a person who cannot be held responsible for his own actions because of mental illness, disease of the brain, or intellectual disability. Imbecile means a person who is an adult but has the mind of a child. Impotent means a man who cannot have sexual erection. This does not include selective impotence, where a husband is no longer aroused by his wife. Blind means a person who lost vision on both eyes. The victim needs to be completely blind in both eyes, not just one. If only one eye is lost, it falls under paragraph 3 of serious physical injuries, which carries a lower penalty. Element of the second type of serious physical injuries: 1. That the accused wounded, beat or assaulted the victim, and 2. That as a result of the physical injuries, the victim have a. Lost the use of speech, or the power to hear or to smell, or b. Lost an eye, a hand, a foot, an arm, or a leg, or shall have lost the use of any such member, or c. Become incapacitated to work which he is habitually engaged in. Loss of hearing must be on both ears. If the loss of hearing is only on one ear, again, it falls under paragraph 3 of serious physical injuries, which carries a lower penalty. Loss of use of an eye, hand, foot, arm, or leg must be permanent. If the loss of use is temporary, again, it falls under paragraph 3 of serious physical injuries, which carries a lower penalty. Loss of capacity to work must also be permanent, otherwise it will fall under paragraph 3 or 4 depending on the duration of the incapacity. Elements of the third type of serious physical injuries: 1. That the accused wound, beat or assaulted the victim, and 2. That as a result of the physical injuries the victim have a. Become deformed, or b. Lost any other part of the body or the use thereof, or c. Become incapacitated to work which he is habitually engaged in for more than 90 days. Deformity requires that it be a. Physical ugliness, b. Permanent and definite abnormality, and c. Conspicuous and visible. If, as a result of the assault, hitting the victim with a stool on the bridge of his flat nose, the nose became sharp, the accused cannot be said to have deformed the victim since he became better looking. If the abnormality is temporary, i.e. it healed back to normal after some time, like a bruise or swelling, it is not a deformity. Likewise, when the injury is ugly and permanent but is not conspicuous or visible, there is no deformity according to the law. All three must be present for deformity to apply. However, a broken front tooth is a deformity. It is physically ugly, it is a permanent abnormality, and it is visible. The loss of body parts in the second type versus in the third type are easy to tell apart. In the second type, the body parts lost are principal body parts, eye, hand, arm, feet and legs, meaning they have the most utility or use, while in the third type, the body parts are non-principal, other body parts, or less useful. Elements of the fourth type of serious physical injuries: 1. That the accused wound, beat or assaulted the victim, and 2. That as a result of the physical injuries caused illness and incapacity for labor to the victim for more than 30 days. Incapacity to work. The use of the words, which he was habitually engaged in types 2 and 3 means that the victim should have some kind of vocation or job. Therefore, if the victim is jobless, his or her injuries will not fall under types 2 or 3, but might fall on other grounds for physical injuries. Type 4 does not have this kind of requirement. The law uses the words incapacity for labor, which means it includes all kinds of labor including house chores. Therefore, if the victim could not even sweep the floor for more than 30 days, even if he or she is jobless, it is still serious physical injuries. The periods of incapacity do not require medical attendance. Medical attendance means the need for a medical professional, doctor, nurse, etc., or medicine to help heal the injury. The law only requires that the victim could not work for a certain period of time. Ordinary physical injuries versus mutilation. The distinction between ordinary physical injuries and mutilation is intent. The intent in ordinary physical injuries is to wound, beat, or assault the victim, and as a result there is physical injury. In mutilation, the intent is to deprive the victim of the use of the body part lopped, clipped, or cut off. To simplify, in mutilation, the part removed was targeted, while in ordinary physical injuries, they are not. Qualified serious physical injuries. If the victim is any of the persons enumerated under the crime of parricide, or if the wounding, beating, or assaulting is attended by any of the circumstances enumerated under the crime of murder, the law provides for a harsher or higher penalty. Excessive chastisement. The last paragraph of Article 263 exempts a parent from criminal liability should such parent cause serious physical injuries on his or her child due to extreme methods of discipline. This exemption only applies when the offender is the parent of the victim, and the intent is to discipline the child. Therefore, if the evidence shows that the intent of the father is to maltreat his child and not to discipline, this exception will not apply. Likewise, even if the intention of the stepfather is to discipline the child, but physical injuries resulted, this exemption will also not apply. That concludes our lecture. If you wish to rewatch this video, it will be made available on YouTube. As always, share to those who do not have access to the internet. This is Mr. Moslina. Thank you for listening. Have a good day to you all. See you on our next lecture.